Didn't have any men to be an Air Raid Warden, so I was the Air Raid Warden.
What did that job consist of?
Going to a meeting at the East Side Fire Hall. And here's this little girl with all these old men. They didn't know what to do with me. But there was nobody on Fawcett Street. And there were other men on Fawcett Street, but they could, I'm going to be honest with you, they couldn't speak English. They still were not. My mother was in the hospital, and she was in for about 4 months. And she had real bad legs. So I had to stay with my grandmother, my aunts. And it was cold, and it was better to be there. I couldn't be here alone, I was too young. So they didn't have an air. And of course, no airplane was going to get in this far. But still in all, civil defense said you had to have an air raid warden for every block, or for every area. So I was the one for the east side.
Did you have a helmet or anything like that? Or?
Oh yes, I had plaques, and I had a clipboard with all the names. People lived in each houses. Oh, I was very officious.
What kind of plaques? What?
Just a clipboard with, you know what I mean, that you could go and write. Just a clipboard.
Okay.
But you had identification that you were the Air Raid Warden. And I'm sure they were just old mine helmets.
Huh.
You know, the ones they wore underground.
That barracks that the men stayed in, that was at the Pennsylvania mine?
Mm-mm.
Where
No.
was it?
It was right about 700 block on East Broadway. The Pennsylvania mine was 1200 East.
And so in the First World War, there were soldiers at 700 East Broadway in the First World War.
The militia was in here.
Was that the...
We were under martial law.
Do you remember, did your dad ever tell you something about that? He was
My
not.
mother did.
What did she tell you?
Because I don't know that he was here in 1917, 1918. He was still in service. See, he wasn't here. Martial law was... The copy's out there. It was agitation.
Was that
by
the
the
group?
unions.
Was that the group that Omar Bradley was with, or was he with another group of soldiers?
That I can't tell you.
She didn't know. She didn't know of him or tell you about him.
I know she. Remember after World War I, Pershing came here. You know, that is a long time ago. That's 80 some odd years ago.
What now? We were talking about D.G. Stivers, and your dad and he seemed to have kind of a special relationship.
Kind of a father-son.
Was that the way it was? And it started with a mutual like of weapons?
Just a little, I want to say a young man in the Hennessy building. And D.G. Stivers taking a liking to him.
And so what were some of the, one of your brothers is named after?
Daniel.
Was named after Stivers?
Yeah.
And then your dad was a pallbearer at his funeral?
Uh-huh.
And do you remember Stivers at all?
Yes. There's a picture in there of a little birthday party. In that book there, in the first part of it, there's a group of kids there at a birthday party. The little girl down in the front, the little girl down the bottom front is Gay Stivers, their daughter. Isn't it in there? Ugh. Oops, your camera's
okay.
Down here in the 1200 block on Platinum. Who lives there now? Young Gay Stivers, grew up, married an engineer, and lived in Chile for many, many years. And she died very young, left her family.
Did they have any other children?
They adopted this girl. She was an adopted girl. Very nice.
Did you know Mrs. Stivers?
Very much.
What was she like?
Not on camera.
Okay. But they married late in life, didn't
Very,
they?
very, very.
You don't know anything about D.G. Stivers' first wife? What happened there?
Nothing at all.
Do you know anything about where he came from?
No, you know, it's funny. It's like he just appeared in, I've never known where he came from, but for some reason or other, I figured it was the South. Because they were haughty. You know, they had a superior attitude. I don't know how else to put it, but they thought they were just a little above, you know.
Kind of an aristocratic attitude.
Haughty still goes well. Mrs. Stivers the same way. She was very bossy.
Well, was she from Anaconda?
I haven't got a foggiest idea on her either. But I know that I still had, she was still around in the 60s. Because I know my baby beds and all that kind of stuff. When Gay was coming home with their children, Mrs. Stivers called and asked if I would like to sell them. So I said, sure. The high chairs and all that. She said well, I was up in the Uptown store. She was getting ready for Gay to come home. She said, I got a good stuff for the babies. And I said, oh, heck, I got a house full of it. You know, I'll just have Bob take it down to you. So she wanted to pay for it. And I said, oh, sakes, no.
Well, when you went to their house, did you notice if they had an arms room there in the house? A vault for weapons?
I would not know that.
Well, you worked at the Montana Hardware?
Uh-huh.
Up on North Main?
Down on South Montana.
Oh, okay. Wrong place. Did your dad ever indicate where they kept the weapons for the gunmen?
Oh, yeah. Trying to remember which month. Well, I know an awful lot of the, and I'd have to say, sleeping bags. But of course, every time there was an uprising or a strike or anything, they got all new stuff in. They brought in, well, they just bring a freight car in with refrigerators, beds, cots, blankets, personal equipment, and they just bring them up by freight car. You could run them over any track in the city of Butte and run them into the mines and distribute them. The original was a great one for distributing gasoline and oil, and that was on right across from St. Mary's. Where did he keep it?
Did your dad refer to himself as a gunman?
No.
So what?
He was Rent, Fire, and Protection.
What was his official title?
Manager of the Rent, Fire, and Protection.
From what years?
30s. After he was head of the relief here in Butte during the Depression. He handled, that was his, he took care of that too. And after that, then he became the head of Rent, Fire, and Protection.
So
That was in the early 30s.
So about the time of the tear gas incident, he was manager of Rent, Fire, and Protection. He moved over into law enforcement, private law enforcement. And then sometime before that, he was running the relief.
But he was still working for the, yes, he was working for the government and the relief, but he was still company. Do you know what I mean? The company still ran everything. And nobody went hungry here.
Did they run the WPA?
Workman's, no, that was government.
Okay. But
the company didn't run the WPA, that was government. But still, they called it the relief here in Butte.
Where people would go to get food and
Right.
stuff like that. Did he ever talk about Mayor Hosworth?
No, but I remember it. I remember something, and it's...
Do you remember when Con Kelly's Pierce Arrow was turned over on, I think it was on Granite in Wyoming, and the gunmen were going to come out from behind the wall before it was
that was
burned up?
1932, 33.
Did you ever say anything about that?
Well, I think I just remember him coming home a little bit ticked off.
Yeah.
You know, I think, is that the one he walked through? He just drew his revolver and walked through?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, he did. There's some articles there from out-of-town newspapers.
That was 34 strike.
Yeah. So that would be, see, he was then, that was his department then. So see, he took on, I think he took on that department in the 20s. But still part of his duty was to see that the people in Butte were fed and clothed And that was run out of the Chamber of Commerce office.
Do you ever talk about the association, Associated Industries?
Not that I can't remember us sitting down and just talking
Yeah.
about labor union problems.
Yeah.
It was all because he came home and he talked about it at dinner time, or something else, I can't remember.
Do a,
It was just part of your life. It was
Yeah.
just,